Right, let's talk more about the issues of equity in the workplace, the ratification of the Employment Equity Act. We have with us Chief Director of Labour Policy at the Department of Employment and Labour, Thembinkosi Mkalipi. We've got Solidarity Deputy CEO Anton from Bijl, as well as Labour Analyst Michael Bagraim. You can weigh in tonight also on 072-110-5584. Gentlemen, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening here on In Focus. Michael, let's begin with you, maybe, as I suppose the more neutral party between the two gentlemen. Maybe you'll assist us here. Let's talk firstly about the equity in the workplace in general, and whether we are at a point at South Africa, or even we were at a point in South Africa when we introduced the Employment Act of 1998, where we needed to make employment equity compulsory.
Well, look, the bottom line is we've had 20 years of employment equity and it hasn't worked. It's been a complete failure. Social engineering over history has always been a failure. It is wrong. It's wrong in the sense of, you look back to what the Nazis did, look what the Nationalist Party did. It didn't work. It never will work. And the point is, it doesn't help to take a broken piece of legislation, which by its very nature is social engineering, and then try and make it more harsh. It sounds ridiculous. So if you're busy tightening something and you've now tightened it to the end and it hasn't worked, why tighten it more? It just doesn't help at all. So I'm very much against the whole idea of employment equity in the first place. But we've got it, and now what we've gone and seen what the minister has done. Sadly, he's now taken it to that next level of madness. Yeah. And quite frankly, I think it's wrong.
So before then the introduction of this, as you say, social engineering, what was in place to achieve workplace equity?
Well, we've got all our labour laws. We've got 19 pieces of labour legislation. We've got a constitution. The Constitution is probably one of the world's best constitutions, and it calls for equality. It calls for equality of all people living in South Africa. And that equality, we have to strive to get that equality. I understand that we come from a broken past. We come from apartheid. Apartheid was social engineering favoring whites. Now, what we need to do, obviously, we need to eventually reflect the demographics of South Africa. We do need to get there, and we will get there. But you don't get there by social engineering. You get there by training people, educating people, upskilling people, and, of course, loosening the knot. You can't have racist legislation to try and make it look more equal. It doesn't work. You can't make one person more equal than another to get equality. We've got the majority of people in South Africa are black. The majority of people in South Africa are not getting trained by this government. We need to improve our education system. We need to improve skills. Now we don't have a pool of people. And all you're doing now is we're chasing those with skills. We're chasing them out of the country to go and use their skills elsewhere and make other countries rich. South Africa is in a desperate state right now. We've got 40% unemployment. Just think about it, 40% unemployment. The youth are about 60% unemployment. You go into the townships, some townships, people are recording almost 80% unemployment. How is equity helping that? It doesn't help that at all. We need to concentrate on education.
Mr. Mkalipi, let's bring you in here then. There is a feeling that, of course, government sat down and they said, we need to eliminate unfair discrimination in the workplace. 2, we need to prohibit unfair discrimination from continuing to happen going forward. 3, we need to make sure that there's equity in the workplace. And we're talking here equity as far as race, equity as far as gender, equity as far as disability is concerned. And therefore, because this is not happening automatically, we should employ some kind of an act in place that will at least force the employers to adhere to these standards. Have you been successful as far as purpose is concerned, as far as how people have interpreted what you have put in place and applied it?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that the Employment Equity Act has not succeeded to meet its objective, and there are many reasons for that. One of those reasons would be that there was no proper buy-in from industry on these issues. I mean, the second one, there's no doubt that some of the issues that Mr. Bagraim is raising are correct, that if the economy is not growing, it's not easy. It's not that it cannot be done. Transformation becomes a little bit difficult. There's no doubt about that. But from where we're sitting is that in terms of this bill that has been passed by the president, I'm not going to talk about what the minister has published, which is out for public comment, is not final yet. I'll ask Mr. Bagraim and Solidarity to wait towards the final document after the publication for comment. But there's no doubt that there are challenges in employment equity, and this bill is trying to deal with those issues. Thank you.
Yeah. Anton, let's bring you in here. Yourself, your views on equity in the workplace, right? There is a challenge, many are saying, that exists as far as race equity is concerned, gender equity is concerned, and disability is concerned, that these groups, particularly in certain economic sectors, are not getting a fair share of opportunities. What's the position of Solidarity?
Yeah, good evening, Darby, and your listeners. At the end of the day, I must agree with Michael. One have to look at holistically to transformation and empowerment. If you look at the international conventions that we are signatories parties of, you will see that they emphasizes nuanced approach to transformation and to empowerment. So they say you cannot only look at representativity and demographics and the economically active population. You looked at nuanced approach. You must look at input empowerment, where you look at education, upskilling, and the like. So we say that's the proper way to go about transformation and empowerment. But we see this is not happening. We see that employment equity has not worked, and now they only use stronger regulations and guidelines to try to enforce that. That will not work. It's not due to the fact that employers doesn't want to buy into empowerment. There's simply not the skill to use employment equity the way that it's being proposed by the department.
Yeah, give me practically what you mean by that there's just simply no skill. So, for example, up until this point, employers had the leeway to set their own targets in their own sectors, which is something that would be changed now with this amended act, if I suppose it goes ahead. But when employers have that opportunity to say, let's correct the situation, set our own targets, yet they still fail to do so, how do you bring that down to say there was a lack of skill?
Yeah, well, if you look at the regulations being proposed by the department, you'll see it's the top 3 levels. So it's top management, it's professional, and it's skilled. So what they use, they only use the economically active population, either nationally or regional. They don't take into account the fact that for top management, you need some sort of skills, you need some sort of experience, you need some sort of education. And what we say is, if you look at the regulations, there's nothing stating now the economically active population is sensitized by some sort of education need. They say black persons must be, for example, 79% represented at top management. We say that cannot work like that. You need educated individuals, irrespective of their race, to be appointed to top management, and therefore, if you need to appoint someone, you need to look at education and skills, and that's currently not being proposed by the department.
Yeah. So, Mkalipi, that's the charge, right? You are looking at politically something that is attractive, that is seductive. It certainly will make you popular, but you are not dealing with the bigger issue. One of employment, one of education, 2 of education, and 3 of actually properly capacitating people for the workplace. That if you were to deal with those difficult things, it would be able to address this question of equity. How does the department respond to that?
Well, let's start with the issue of employment. As I've indicated, that any transformation that takes place is far easier in a growing economy. But this bill, employment equity, is not dealing with employment. There are other interventions of government, whether they are successful or not, that's something else, that deals with employment. There are many significant interventions that have been made that are trying to solve this issue. Just recently, the president and his team has agreed with business on what measures to take to try and solve some of the things that inhabit employment. There's no doubt about that. Employment is critical for any economy to move forward and transform. There's no doubt about that. The issue of skills, presently in the law, there's no requirement in the law that employers must employ people who do not have skills, who are not able to do the job. That's not issue. That's not an issue at all. And the issue of skills is important in our legislation. If you look on the legislation, the bill, the act that's passed by President, and the regulation that were published, well before, not the last regulation, well before, they stipulate what are the justifiable reasons that an employer can use for not complying with the target that I said. One of them is availability of skills. It talks to the availability of skills. An employer can say, I have not been able to get the necessary people that I need to get because the target that I've set, I have not been able to get the people with the necessary skills. And then the Act goes further and say, well, the issue of development skills is an issue that must be handled both by government and by industry itself. And when industry has made out and look on its scope and look at what is available, then they need to come up and say, what is it? What steps are we going to take to try and deal with the barriers that might not make it possible for us to meet our targets? Therefore, all the issues that are being raised by Solidarity, by Mr. Bagraim, are all embodied in the regulation in terms of skills and training. It is accepted that skills and training is an integral part of transformation, and that employers are not expected to put people who do not have the necessary skills just because they are colored or they are Indian or they are black or they are women for that matter. That's not what the law is saying. Thank you.
Yeah. What is available then in terms of skill? Because obviously, you, as you mentioned, there are other interventions at government level. But when you are putting this act in place, you're putting it with the expectation that there is something that is available in terms of skill. But what is preventing that skill from taking advantage of the opportunity is the fact that there is no targets that are being set and a responsibility being placed on the employer to actually recognize that skill that is available out there.
Well, I mean, the first thing that for us, we're not buying to the notion that the reason employment equity has not succeeded is because there's no skill. Now, when we go and interact with companies, I mean, we've been interacting with many companies, banks and all of them. When they raise the issue of skills and training and say, well, we need actuaries. Now, when you start looking at what's available in the company, you just asking questions, are all your senior managers professionally qualified, technicians, are actuaries? The answer is no. Now, when we ask, why is it possible that a white person who's got a BA degree is good enough to be in senior management, in top management, in professionally qualified, but when you must transform, you're not able to take that risk with a black person. Those are the issues. If a company can show that this function, we need these skills. But I mean, when we look at it, obviously it's a communication that we need, a conversation that we'll have with them. We'll be having this conversation that unpack it. When you say, as I've said, you need these skills, you've got to show that the other people that are present doing the job at those levels also have got that skill. And those are the issues. When we start asking those questions, the answers that we're getting are not the same. But each industry and each company will differ from one to the other dealing with these issues. But there's no doubt that we accept skills is important, whether you're black or white. Skills and training is important, but we're not buying to the notion that for those that must benefit to employment equity, they are not skilled. The only people that are skilled and are trained in this country happen to be white males.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the notion that is being put in front, and we do not accept that.
So, again, let me push a little bit more in terms of what is available. So, where you are sitting with a situation where you're saying there are people who are occupying positions that don't have the qualification, but they are occupy those senior positions? You raise the question, why is a black person not qualified here? They're saying, no, get a qualification. That's one conversation. Do you have qualified black people who are in companies who are not being given opportunities, and therefore you're asking the question, why are these individuals not being given the opportunity?
Well, exactly. If you look on the level of professionally qualified, just look at that level. That level, you've got many African people who are at the level of professionally qualified in many of these sectors. Now, if they are at that level, they are regarded as professionally qualified. Why is it so difficult then to move a step up? That's the issue that we're raising, because you've got the masses at professionally qualified, but they are not able to move a step up to senior manager. We're not saying that skills and training is not a problem in the economy. We're not saying that. We're not undermining the need for skills and training. There's no doubt that that is an issue. But if you're going to argue that the only people that are available who are skilled and trained and educated are white male, will disagree with that. And we're pointing to the data that we're receiving from companies on the number of people that occupy the professionally qualified level and who are not able to move a step up for whatever reason. If they are professionally qualified, maybe if you say they are lacking this skill, this is what we're doing for them to reach there over the next 5 years that we're doing it, then we're talking. But we, as I've said, we are not buying this, because when we look on the data that we are receiving from companies that the employment equity report indicate on a yearly basis, we've got masses of people at professionally qualified level who are not able to move up.
All right, Michael, those three things, address them for me. One, there is no requirement that says employers must employ unskilled people. But two, qualification sometimes is being used as an excuse where others without the professional qualification would occupy those senior positions. But when a black person is required to be promoted to those positions, companies don't want to take the risk. And then the third category, of course, are professionally qualified people who are not being moved up into those positions.
Well, bottom line is Mkalipi's argument, Mr. Mkalipi's argument falls apart. We've got a Labour Relations Act in South Africa, a wonderful piece of legislation. If anyone feels that they're being discriminated against in any way or badly treated, then they will go off to the CCMA or to a bargaining council and they will challenge it. You don't need social engineering to help the individual who feels that he hasn't been, or she hasn't been promoted. And I've been practicing law for the last 40 years, and I personally run off to the CCMA every time I see someone being discriminated against and doesn't get that promotion. Black, white, Indian, colored makes no difference. The bottom line is you don't need social engineering for that. You need law, and we've got law. We've got some fantastic laws in South Africa. You don't need extra law. You don't need another handbrake on job creation. There's another problem. Government should not step in and run businesses. They can't even run government at the moment. And now what they're trying to say is they're going to run business. They're going to go and check to see who has got qualifications, who should be in what position. We're going to challenge it as government. That's the most ridiculous conversation one has ever had. The problem that we've got right now with this social engineering, it gives the minister the power in his sole discretion to set targets. Yes, he'll go out and consult, but this is typical. The minister, who happens to be a communist, will go out and consult, say, I hear you, but I'm going to do what I feel like doing. And he's done just that with his proposed regulations. He's now set targets for the regulations. And it's the most ridiculous thing you've ever read. Those targets, if you start adding them up, don't even add up to 100%. So where do you get these spare people from? The other problem is the economy is shrinking. The employment is shrinking. You can't retrench people to make way for others because they happen to be black, Indian, colored, whatever. The problem we've also seen is that the minister is now saying, I want 0% of coloreds in certain jobs in certain areas. Are we going to start moving them around into other provinces? Are you breaking up families because they can't get a job in Durban? It's the most ridiculous set of regulations you've ever seen. Our economy is shrinking, and the government is doing everything in its power to add a handbrake to further job creation. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. This is a minister that's got a bad temper who's just called blacks who are in opposition, he's called them rented blacks. It doesn't make sense at all. I have a problem with social engineering, and I think South Africans have a problem with social engineering. We've lived through apartheid. We don't want to see it again. We don't want to see it in favor of anyone. Why is it that the colored and Indian people of South Africa today are sucking the hind tit again? It just doesn't make any sense. And Mr. Mkalipi himself knows that you can't retrench people to make way for others. And if you're not employing more people, and we've seen that now with all the regulations and all the statistics that are coming out every single quarter, we're seeing that business is shrinking. Yeah. So let's get together, hold hands as South Africans. Let's make sure that eventually we do match the demographics. It will come, but we need to float this ship so that everyone gets floated together. It doesn't help to say we've got a pie. We're not going to grow the pie. We're just going to distribute the pie unevenly to others. Because what you're doing is you're chasing people away. You're telling people we don't want your skills. We're telling people go and find jobs in other jurisdictions. Again, we're chasing those skills away. We need more technical colleges. We need to spend time and energy building up the skills of the people. We've got fantastic people here in South Africa. We've got a young population. None of them are finding jobs. Like I said earlier, in some areas it's 80% unemployment. We can't do this. We can't have another 2 or 3 years like this. It's ridiculous. And now what we've done is we've sent out a group of regulations to be debated and for the minister to say, I've heard you, but I'm implementing them anyway. So the whole thing is wrong. We do need to reflect demographics of the country. And I don't believe any single business out there doesn't want to reflect the demographics. What they want to do is they want to run their businesses profitably, and hopefully one day we can say we've now properly reflected the demographics of this country. But to start subjugating certain people doesn't make sense. And we've seen this.
Michael, I'm going to come back. We'll wrap it up in a moment. After the break, we'll continue this conversation with our panelists on the Employment Equity Act, Chief Director of Labour Policy at the Department of Employment and Labour, Thembinkosi Mkalipi, Solidarity Deputy CEO Anton, as well as Labour Analyst Michael Bagraim. Let's continue the conversation then, still with our panelists Michael Bagraim, Anton, as well as Mkalipi. Anton, let me bring you in here. As far as the department is concerned, there are two areas of concern. There's no appetite to promote professionally qualifying black people, yet you find that white people who qualify are promoted quite easily. Two, there is no appetite to take risk on competent black people to take senior positions, while it's absolutely okay when white employees get those kinds of opportunities. How do you explain that?
Yes, I don't move in the same circles as Mr. Mkalipi, but what I can tell you is I don't have a lot of friends raving racist employers that doesn't want to employ black employees, irrespective of the fact that they have the necessary educational qualifications. In my 16 years as a labour attorney, I haven't seen long lines of black employees going to the CCMA or to the Labour Court, telling the court, no, we have this racist employers that doesn't want to employ us or doesn't want to promote us. That doesn't happen. So I don't see Mr. Mkalipi can tell you, no, employers doesn't want to appoint top management black employees. That doesn't happen. We say there's a problem with skills, there's a problem with education. If you look at the three categories set out in the regulations, there's certain educational and expertise necessary for you to qualify for top management position. And we see that there's a problem currently in South Africa with skills. So we don't see Mr. Mkalipi's raving racist employers in South Africa. No, we don't see that.
Yeah. Mr. Mkalipi, why are you not making this data available? I mean, to the parties that are arguing some of your policies and regulations, at least, that you're bringing in to say, here's the data. This is where this is happening. Because as far as they're concerned, they've not seen this happening. And in fact, if it was happening, they reckon that the Labour Relations Act is more than enough to deal with it. Take it to the CCMA, and they would have sorted these issues of discrimination quite easily.
Well, I mean, the data is there, is out there. In fact, next week, the Minister will be releasing, accepting a report from the Employment Equity Commission on the latest data. And I'm inviting both Mr. Bagraim and Mr. Van der Berg to come in and get a copy of that, or we can even email them all the copies of the report over the last 20 years that we've been issuing. The statistics talk for themselves. If you look on the data that's been released, you look on professionally qualified, you look on what's the percentage of black, colored, Indian people on that level, and then you look on the level upwards. Then the question that they must ask, and I'm saying, if the data give us that, why is it not possible to have the people who are at that level to move the next level, which is senior manager?
Yeah.
Now, these are the issues that are there. The data is out there, it's available, and I'm saying we are launching it again next week, the report for the last financial year, and we're inviting them to come in.
But the attitude then, Mr. Mkalipi, becomes, why is government stepping into people's private businesses and telling them who qualifies and who doesn't qualify?
Well, I mean, in terms of, we've taken a policy position that employment equity is very critical and important for this country, from where we're coming from. And that's a decision that we took 20 years ago. The same thing with labor relations. Now, if we are going to have that attitude, then we should not even get involved, even where there's unfair dismissal. The reason there's a CCMA, there are inspectors, is precisely that it is right, international convention and international best practice say it is right for government to intervene even in the economy if the economy is not delivering the results that it needed to deliver. That's why we've got the CCMA. That's why we've got courts to adjudicate a dispute. They got to interfere in the running of the organizations if they are not run in the interest of society. The same with employment equity. Government has got a right to introduce laws if the economy and society is not moving in the direction that it should move to address imbalances that are there in society. Now, this issue that says that you should not introduce this, you should let business run their business, then let us abolish employment equity, let us abolish the labor relations, let us abolish the business, BCA, all legislation, let it be free for all. Employers decide what is best for them. The reason they also accept that there's got to be laws, one of them, the Labor Relations Act that they are citing, is precisely because they accept that you cannot leave the market only at the whim of business and labor only. There are workers out there that need legal protection, and that's what law is all about. And in this case, it's legal protection to ensure that there is equity in the workplace. At least with Mr. Bagraim, we agree on one thing. He agrees that we've got to reflect the demographic of this country, except that we disagree at what speed should you reach there. How should we do? What are the tools that we need to reach there? That's our agreement. At least we agree on one thing. I'm happy about that. Thank you.
So the part of what's changing, of course, is and which is probably creating a whole lot of contestation, is this setting of numerical targets, and that particular responsibility now lying with the minister. And the question being asked is to say, with the limited opportunities, limited economic growth, limited space for advancement. What are you saying? You're saying they must retrench other people, make way for others, and why must the minister be the one who makes this particular call?
Again, this issue, we've debated this issue for a long time. The minister is making that call after consulting the sectors. Now, the minister has not published what the targets are going to be. He has published regulation for public comment. Let us give the minister opportunity to consider the public comment, publish. Then when the minister publishes the regulation, then you can say, well, the minister has not listened to this party and that party. You can't assume that the minister is not going to listen to anybody. And the minister has been consulting with all sectors on these issues. Therefore, for us, we do not think that there's an issue. And an employer that is not able to meet its target, it's got costs to use. They can select justifiable reason. I mean, the law is clear that although the minister has set up after consultation this target, even employer, for whatever reason, the economy has changed and they've set up a target and they are not able to meet that target, and they can show that because of the change in the economy, we're not able to meet our target. That's a justifiable reason. The law accepts that. Therefore, for us, from where we are sitting from when we debated this in Parliament, with Mr. Bagraim present in Parliament, when it was passed by Parliament and now signed by the President, we think it covers all the bases.
Yeah.
On the regulation that was published by the Minister, I just want us to make our comment on the regulation and then criticize the Minister when he published the final regulation. If we want to say the Minister has not taken into consideration the comment, let us base that on the final document. We can't assume and speculate that the Minister is not going to consider comments made by the sector.
So let's clear it one more time. The fear again and the concern being raised is that you are going to unreasonably exclude certain companies from, for example, government contracts based on these numerical targets that the minister is going to come up with.
Well, I mean, the law allows that. Present, it's not a new issue. It's been in the law for the last 20 years. The ability to do business with government when you comply with employment equity. It's been in the law. It was not promulgated. It will be promulgated into law now. Again, we say, a company that genuinely cannot meet its target and it's got justifiable reason for not meeting its target, it's got nothing to fear on that. And therefore, we don't see that and if you look on the justifiable reason, it covers those justifiable reasons were discussed and negotiated at NETLEC between labor and businesses and us. We've agreed that they covered all areas. If an employer selects any one of them and is justifiable, there's no reason for them that they will not get a certificate.
Yeah. Mr. Bagraim, two areas there that you must address. It seems you are completely ignoring the Employment Equity Commission reports for the last 20 years that certainly are giving you the data of what's happening as far as equity is concerned. But two, there are enough justifiable reasons to exempt companies that feel otherwise they are being forced to do something that is unworkable.
Yeah, well, first of all, we're not ignoring the Employment Equity Commission at all. That shows the argument that I've raised, that people are not being properly educated and trained. We've destroyed all our technical colleges in this country. I know it's not Mr. Mkalipi's mandate, because that's the education department. But the Labour Department needs to work in hand in jar with the education department, because that's what's happening. The other problem is you can't change statistics at all when in fact you're in a shrinking environment. It doesn't make any sense to say, we now want to change it, we now want equality, when you're shrinking. They've agreed, government's agreed, you can't retrench to make way for someone else. The other thing is, with those statistics, let one person come forward, just one person come forward and say, I've been discriminated, I'm black, I've got the same education, I've got the same ability as the white person, and I haven't been given the promotion. Let them come forward. I'd like to get the work. I can make money from that. I'd go to court. It doesn't happen. It happens on occasion, and then we go and challenge it. You don't need more law for that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the minister, in his sole discretion, is setting these targets. Now, that is the most ridiculous thing that anyone can think of, because here we've got a minister, we've got an economy. It's a complicated economy, complicated industries. The minister knows nothing about any of the industries whatsoever. He's going to take in a couple of proposals from people. Solidarity will send in a proposal, and others will send in proposals about the regulations. He'll have a look at it, shake his head, and say, well, we're going ahead anyway. Then, now we're hearing from government, well, you can challenge it. If you feel you've got reasons, you can go and challenge it. So there'll be a complicated appeal process that'll cost a fortune with lawyers, and you'll have to go through a whole process like you had with the minimum wage legislation. If you want to get an exemption, you can apply and you get turned down. Can you imagine businesses trying to do this when they're trying to earn a living? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then who decides? The Department of Labor decide whether your reason for not having enough black people in your company is good or bad. They make that decision themselves. Eventually you'll have to land up in the labor court and cost you an absolute fortune doing that 2 years later, and then your company's closed down, it's gone bankrupt. So it doesn't make any sense on that level. What we've got now, we are facing a problem right now. And the problem right now is that we have colored people sitting, for instance, in Bloemfontein. They've got 0% employment equity. They can't have any coloreds in that company. Where are you telling them to go? You're telling them to go off to New Zealand and to leave the country? Even if they got skills, you got 0%. That's what the minister said. It's the same with Indian people. You're going to start moving them around like we had with the black people under apartheid. What happens now? How do you decide who's black, colored, Indian? Do you have the pencil test again? What is Mr. Mkalipi saying? Is he telling us that we're going to start having inspectors from the department to come and check to see if Michael Bagraim is white, brown, colored, Indian? What is he? And we're going to have to test him to see whether he really is what he says he is. Can you imagine? We're going back to the prehistoric ages of apartheid. It can't make any sense. Come on. Yeah. We're living in a modern economy. We need to move forward properly. We need to make sure that we lift the business community. And all the messages that we're getting from the business community is that they're not going to invest in their own businesses. Yeah. They want to wait and see for the next few years and see what happens with this legislation.
All right. Anton, you're putting the horse before, or the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart. My English is depleting at this time of the night. But give the minister an opportunity to actually listen to your submissions and make a decision.
Yeah, I've had a discussion with Mr. Mkalipi on previous occasions. In essence, what he argues is, don't worry, if you want to comply, you can comply. If you don't want to comply, don't worry, the minister won't impose fines. It's a nice to have, man. That we don't read in the Act. We see it's prescriptive. You must comply. You must implement. And there will be fines, and you may not do business with a government if you do not comply. So that's what we read. Mr. Mkalipi says, no, there's some sort of justification grounds. What he omits to say is that justification ground is in a 2018 draft proposal between parties. That's not final regulations. There's no final justification grounds for persons to say, no, I cannot comply with this. So we say, no, we don't believe the department, and we don't believe in the fact that the minister will make rational decisions because he's a great minister. We don't believe that. We believe that the minister and the government cannot make rational decisions, and therefore we will contest the regulations and we will contest the Act as well.
Varying thoughts tonight challenging the amendments to the Employment Equity Act. Much appreciated, gentlemen. Thanks so much for coming on. Let's look at what you are saying tonight on WhatsApp, 072-110-5584. These are your comments. Anonymous saying, hi, Thabo. Employers are anti-transformation. It's time that government leads without fear or favor. Another one, Anonymous saying, I don't agree with the solidarity, gentlemen. Large numbers of black people are sitting in there, professionally qualified, but are not moving up. It's there. I'm no expert, but I know this. Much appreciated. Thank you for coming on.